A Northland farmer has been found guilty of mistreating rodeo animals after a group of lawyers was forced to take a private prosecution against him because the ministry wouldn't. Derek Robinson illegally used an electric cattle prodder on two collapsed distressed steers to force them out of a chute and into the arena for a roping competition at rodeos in Whangarei in 2016 and 2017. The New Zealand Animal Law Association says it took Robinson to court because even after a Ministry of Primary Industries inspector investigated and recommended Derek Robinson be prosecuted, the ministry just issued him with a warning letter. I asked association spokesperson Saar Cohen what Robinson did wrong.
When an animal is too distressed to be part of that form of entertainment, so they call it, the law requires the organisers to open the gate. In this case, what happened is instead of opening the gate, Mr. Robinson just took out his prodder and used it as a charged prodder. So he pushed the button and basically shocked these two animals to make them stand up. As soon as they stood up, then the gate was open and they were thrown into the arena to be then pursued, chased by riders on horses. It happened on two separate events. One in 2016 and then another one in 2017 up north.
What do you think of how he behaved?
I think Mr. Robinson simply wasn't aware of the rodeo code. He's a very experienced farmer. He knows a lot about cattle, knows a lot about cows, and he probably behaved to them in the same way that he behaves on the farm. And what he failed to realize is that there are different rules in rodeo, and that you can't do that, and in that particular situation, the gate had to be open and they had to be released.
Is it cruel to prod an animal when it is in that distressed state?
It is cruel, and from our perspective, it's illegal, which is the important point that we made in court.
This was a private prosecution. Why is that?
It all started in a checkpoint story some years ago, where we heard about Mr. Robinson and his activities with his prodder. And at the time, the matter was referred to MPI for investigation, and we were very pleased to hear that MPI were investigating it. There was a very thorough investigation, and we've obtained the records of the investigation, and we were very impressed with the level of investigation that the MPI inspector exhibited. And then that inspector who investigated it recommended a prosecution. Something then went wrong within MPI, which we don't really know what, but when it went to a senior manager to basically approve the prosecution, that manager decided not to prosecute Mr. Robinson. Now, we saw that. We realized that Mr. Robinson offended at least twice, once in 2016 and then once in 2017. And we believed that he was going to do it again, and we thought he should be stopped. So as a matter of public interest, we thought he should be prosecuted. The problem of MPI having good evidence but refusing to prosecute is not new. This is something that we saw about 4 years ago when Michael Heron QC released his review into the fisheries prosecution, which is also MPI. And Heron QC criticised MPI back then in his report for having really good evidence but not prosecuting. So in the prosecutorial world, you need two tests before you file charges. The first one is the evidence, and the second is the public interest. And what the Heron report highlighted is there is a problem within MPI with understanding the public interest test. When is a matter important enough to be prosecuted in court? And we just looked at the investigation report, we looked at the recommendation to prosecute, and we simply couldn't understand why that manager in MPI decided to stop and not prosecute. And NZALA is a group of about 600 lawyers who love animals and love the law. And when something like this happens and everyone else fails to basically perform their duties, we do see ourselves as the last line of defense here, even though we have no powers to get evidence. But we do act through the court and through the legal system so that the animal's voices be heard.
But you shouldn't have to do that, though, should you, Saar? That's someone else's job.
Correct. Absolutely agree with that. And indeed, what we would like to do is to focus on educational activities and seminars, upskilling MPI, explaining to MPI their duties. Instead, we need to do prosecutions, which, like any other taxpayer, we expect MPI to do on our behalf. But,
so do you think the system is flawed currently as it stands?
The enforcement system?
Yes.
MPI have never, ever prosecuted a rodeo prosecution. Never. And that we think that created a sort of a false sense of immunity for the rodeo cowboys, because it was well known that MPI are interested in farmers and farms. And we asked the question, why shouldn't the cowboys have the same standard of enforcement as any farmer has? Why do we have one law, one rule for the farmers and one rule for the cowboys? There's definitely an issue there with regards to rodeo. I don't know why over 50 years they have never ever touched rodeos.
That was Saar Cohen, and MPI provided Checkpoint this explanation as to why it did not prosecute the abuse. It says the ministry took various factors into account, including the degree of harm to the animals involved. It was decided it was not in the public interest to pursue a prosecution, and a formal warning was issued.